The people who walk away during your hardest season are often the same ones who never get to witness your greatest victory. Caleb Morrison pulled his dusty white work truck into the driveway, just as the last light of a humid summer evening disappeared behind the rooftops of Charlotte. Fine gray construction dust still covered the front bumper, and a rolled set of blueprints rested on the passenger seat beside an empty coffee cup that had gone cold hours earlier. He shut off the engine, leaned back for a brief moment, and closed his eyes. It had been another 14-hour day filled with inspections, meetings, revised estimates, and unanswered questions from subcontractors who depended on him for work. Running a construction company during uncertain times had never been easy, but Caleb had always believed that difficult seasons tested commitment more than talent. He climbed out of the truck, picked up the blueprints, and walked toward the front door of the modest brick house he and Jasmine Morrison had shared since the beginning of their marriage. The moment he stepped inside, he noticed two large suitcases sitting near the staircase. The silence inside the house felt unfamiliar, almost rehearsed. Jasmine appeared from the hallway carrying another bag over her shoulder. She looked composed, not angry, as though she had already finished every difficult conversation in her mind long before Caleb arrived home. He placed the blueprints carefully on the kitchen counter and looked at her. "Are you going somewhere?" he asked quietly. Jasmine folded her arms. "I am leaving." Caleb remained calm. "For work?" She slowly shook her head. "No, I am leaving this marriage." The words settled into the room without either of them raising their voices. Caleb looked at the suitcases again before meeting her eyes. "Can you tell me why?" Jasmine let out a tired sigh. "Because I cannot keep pretending everything is going to change. Every year you promise the next project will turn things around. Every year you spend more time chasing contracts than living your life." Caleb listened without interrupting. "I know these past few years have been difficult," he replied. Jasmine looked toward the work truck parked outside through the front window. "Difficult? Caleb, you are still driving that old truck to jobs that barely pay enough to keep your company alive. You call yourself a contractor, but all I see is someone who keeps working harder and getting nowhere." Caleb did not defend himself. He had learned that some arguments only became louder when both people insisted on speaking instead of listening. Jasmine picked up the last suitcase. "I am tired of waiting for a future that never arrives. I need stability, and I do not believe you can give it to me anymore." Caleb nodded slowly, his expression unchanged. "If that is truly how you feel, I will not stop you." Jasmine hesitated for only a second before opening the front door. "I hope someday you understand why I had to leave." Caleb watched quietly as she loaded the luggage into her car, closed the trunk, and drove away without looking back. The house became completely silent except for the ticking clock above the stove. He stood alone in the kitchen for several moments before his phone, resting beside the blueprints, suddenly began to ring. The caller identification displayed a familiar name. Olivia Grant. Caleb Morrison answered the call after the second ring, still standing in the quiet kitchen where only minutes earlier his marriage had changed forever. "This is Caleb," he said calmly. Olivia Grant's voice carried a level of excitement he had rarely heard during the months they had worked together. "Congratulations," she said. "The Federal Review Board completed the final approval 30 minutes ago. Every signature has been recorded. The contract is officially yours." Caleb closed his eyes for a brief moment, allowing the words to settle before responding. "Thank you, Olivia," she continued without pausing. "The department has authorized tomorrow morning's announcement. The press release has already been scheduled, and the public ceremony will begin at 10 o'clock. Until then, everything remains confidential under the non-disclosure agreement." Caleb looked through the front window toward the empty driveway where Jasmine's car had been parked every evening for years. "I understand," he replied quietly. Olivia hesitated before speaking again. "You sound different than I expected." Caleb smiled faintly. "It has been a long day." She did not ask further questions. After months of negotiations, technical reviews, financial audits, engineering evaluations, and compliance inspections, she understood better than anyone that reaching this point had demanded extraordinary patience. "Your company earned this," she said. "No favors. No shortcuts. The evaluation committee ranked your proposal first because it delivered the strongest combination of safety, cost control, environmental planning, and long-term infrastructure management." Caleb thanked her again before ending the call. He remained standing in silence for another minute, looking at the rolled blueprints resting on the kitchen counter. Those drawings represented countless nights spent refining designs while everyone else slept. Every delayed payment, every rejected proposal, every difficult meeting with lenders, and every weekend spent reviewing engineering specifications had quietly led to this single moment. The contract was worth $500 million, but to Caleb it represented something even greater. It proved that perseverance eventually speaks louder than appearances. Early the next morning, long before sunrise painted the Charlotte skyline, Caleb climbed into the same dusty white work truck and drove toward his office on the edge of the city. Nothing about his routine changed. He stopped at the same neighborhood diner for black coffee, greeted the same waitress who had served him nearly every weekday for the past 3 years, and thanked her before continuing to the office. Inside the modest building, several employees were already reviewing project schedules. Michael Reeves looked up from a conference table covered with engineering drawings and smiled. "I have been waiting all morning," he said. Caleb shook his hand warmly. "Has everyone been notified?" Michael nodded. "Only the leadership team. The rest of the company will hear everything after the government announcement. They still believe today is just another planning meeting." Caleb looked around the room at the project. Managers, estimators, and engineers who had remained loyal through years of uncertainty. "Then let us give them the good news together," he said. Michael handed him a sealed folder containing the official award documents. Across the front, a gold government seal reflected the morning sunlight coming through the conference room windows. Caleb rested his hand on the folder for only a moment before setting it back on the table. "We have waited years for this," he said quietly. "A few more hours will not hurt." Just then Olivia entered the conference room carrying another leather portfolio and smiled as she looked toward Caleb. "The media has arrived," she said. "They are all trying to guess which national corporation won the contract. None of them have any idea they are about to meet you." The conference center overlooking downtown Charlotte buzzed with quiet anticipation as reporters adjusted cameras, government officials reviewed schedules, and representatives from major construction firms exchanged confident smiles. Nearly everyone in the room believed the winning bidder would be one of the country's largest national contractors. Several reporters compared notes while studying a printed list of companies that had publicly competed during earlier qualification rounds. Caleb Morrison's company appeared near the bottom of one page, listed only because federal procurement rules required every qualified bidder to be documented. Few people paid attention to the name. They assumed it had been included for completeness rather than serious consideration. Across the room, Jasmine Morrison entered through the main lobby beside a longtime friend who worked for a regional engineering consultant. "I heard this contract is one of the biggest infrastructure projects awarded this year," her friend said as they accepted visitor badges. Jasmine nodded with interest. "That is what everyone has been saying." Her friend looked toward the stage where government officials were arranging folders behind the podium. "I would not be surprised if one of the national corporations wins. They always seem to land projects like this." Jasmine agreed without hesitation. Companies that size have resources ordinary contractors can never match. Neither of them noticed Caleb's dusty white work truck pulling quietly into a parking space near the side entrance. Unlike the polished executive vehicles filling the reserved front parking area, his truck still carried traces of dried mud around the wheel wells and faint construction dust across the tailgate. Caleb stepped out wearing clean work boots, dark jeans, a crisp blue button-down shirt, and a lightweight gray jacket. He carried a leather portfolio containing the official award documents and walked toward the entrance with the same calm pace he used every morning at his office. Near the registration desk, several guests glanced briefly in his direction before returning to their conversations. One reporter quietly asked another, "Do you think he is part of one of the field inspection teams?" The other shrugged. "Probably another subcontractor waiting to hear who won." Caleb simply smiled politely as he continued walking. He had spent enough years in construction to know that appearances often shaped first impressions far more quickly than resumes ever could. Inside the main hall, Michael Reeves was reviewing the event schedule with federal staff members, while Olivia Grant spoke with the communications director responsible for the official announcement. She noticed Caleb entering through the side doors and immediately excused herself from the conversation. At nearly the same moment, Jasmine turned toward the entrance after hearing someone nearby mention another arriving guest. The moment she recognized Caleb, surprise crossed her face. She quietly walked several steps toward him before stopping. "What are you doing here?" she asked, keeping her voice low. "This is a government event for major contractors." Caleb answered with his usual calm expression. "I know." Jasmine looked around, suddenly uncomfortable that someone she knew might recognize him. "You should not be here unless someone invited you." Caleb nodded once. Someone did. Before Jasmine could ask another question, Olivia crossed the lobby with a warm professional smile and extended her hand toward Caleb in full view of nearby reporters, government officials, and invited guests. "Good morning, Mr. Morrison," she said clearly. "Everything is ready. The secretary and the procurement board are waiting for you backstage." Olivia Grant's greeting immediately changed the atmosphere inside the lobby. Conversations softened, several reporters lowered their voices, and more than one government official turned toward Caleb Morrison with curious expressions. Jasmine Morrison stood motionless, trying to understand why a senior procurement attorney was personally welcoming the man she had believed was struggling to keep a small construction company alive. Olivia smiled warmly and gestured toward the secured hallway leading backstage. "Everyone is ready for you, Mr. Morrison," she said. "The secretary asked to meet you before we begin." Caleb nodded politely. "Thank you, Olivia." Before he could continue walking, Jasmine quietly stepped beside him. "Caleb, what is going on?" she asked, keeping her voice low enough that only he could hear. "Why is she talking to you like that?" Caleb looked at her with the same calm expression she had seen throughout their marriage. "You will understand soon." Jasmine frowned. "Understand what?" Caleb offered a small, respectful smile, but said nothing more. He understood the confidentiality agreement remained in effect until the official announcement began, and he had no intention of breaking the trust placed in him. Olivia led Caleb through the hallway where Michael Reeves was reviewing the final presentation schedule with members of the Federal Communications team. The moment Michael saw Caleb, he walked forward with an enthusiastic handshake. "Good morning, Caleb," he said. "Everything is set. The media attendance is even larger than expected." Caleb smiled. "That is good for the project. People deserve to know where their tax dollars are being invested." Michael nodded. "The secretary appreciated your request to focus today's presentation on the communities this project will serve instead of on company recognition." Caleb answered quietly. "The project is more important than the headlines." Meanwhile, Jasmine remained near the lobby entrance, watching through the open doorway as federal officials greeted Caleb with obvious respect. The image did not fit anything she believed she knew about her husband. Only yesterday, she had called him a failed contractor. Now she was watching senior government leaders welcome him as though he belonged among them. Several reporters nearby began whispering after noticing the unexpected attention surrounding Caleb. One journalist quietly asked another, "Who is that?" The other glanced through his event program before shaking his head. "I have no idea, but everyone important seems to know him." A few minutes later, guests were invited into the main auditorium. Hundreds of chairs faced a wide stage where American and state flags stood beside a large display showing the name of the National Infrastructure Initiative. Television cameras lined the back of the room, while photographers prepared near the front row. Jasmine accepted a seat beside her friend, but found it impossible to concentrate on the conversations around her. She kept looking toward the side entrance where Caleb had disappeared moments earlier. The lights gradually dimmed as the ceremony officially began. A federal program director welcomed the audience before introducing Daniel Brooks, who thanked the engineering teams, procurement staff, and evaluation committee for months of careful work. He explained that the winning proposal had demonstrated exceptional technical excellence, financial responsibility, long-term sustainability, and community impact. The room became completely silent as Daniel paused with a sealed envelope in his hands. He smiled toward the audience before saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce the leader of the company selected to deliver this historic project. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Caleb Morrison to the stage." The auditorium erupted into applause as Caleb Morrison walked confidently onto the stage, carrying nothing except the same worn leather portfolio he had brought to countless project meetings over the years. Television cameras immediately turned toward him while photographers hurried to capture the unexpected moment. Jasmine Morrison sat frozen in her chair, unable to Reconcile the quiet contractor she had left the previous evening with the respected leader, now shaking hands with senior government officials. Daniel Brooks smiled warmly before presenting Caleb with the official contract binder embossed with the federal seal. "Congratulations, Mr. Morrison," he said. "Your company earned this opportunity through one of the most competitive evaluation processes our department has ever conducted." Caleb accepted the binder with both hands. "Thank you," he replied. "My team will honor the trust you have placed in us." Daniel stepped back from the podium and addressed the audience once more. The evaluation committee reviewed proposals from some of the largest construction firms in the country. After months of technical analysis, financial review, safety evaluation, and independent scoring, one company consistently ranked first across every major category. Today, we are proud to announce Morrison Infrastructure Group as the official contractor for this historic $500 million federal project. The room filled with another wave of applause while several reporters quickly began typing updates for their news organizations. Jasmine felt her heartbeat quicken as every screen in the auditorium displayed Caleb's company logo beside photographs of transportation projects his team had successfully completed over the past decade. She realized there were accomplishments she had never even known existed because Caleb had rarely spoken about them outside of work. Daniel invited Caleb to the podium. Caleb adjusted the microphone slightly before looking across the audience with a calm smile. "Good morning, everyone," he began. "First, I want to thank the evaluation committee for conducting a process based on merit, preparation, and accountability. Winning this contract is an incredible honor, but it also represents a tremendous responsibility." The audience became completely silent. "Infrastructure is not simply about concrete, steel, or engineering drawings," Caleb continued. "It is about the families who depend on safe roads, reliable bridges, and communities connected through thoughtful planning. Every dollar invested in this project belongs to the American people, and my team intends to respect that responsibility every single day." Several officials nodded in agreement, while reporters continued taking notes. Caleb never mentioned the contract amount again. Instead, he spoke about construction safety, local hiring, apprenticeship programs, environmental stewardship, and delivering quality work that would serve future generations. Michael Reeves watched proudly from the front row, recognizing many of the ideas Caleb had insisted upon during countless late-night planning sessions. Olivia Grant smiled quietly, knowing the committee had selected exactly the kind of leader they hoped would represent the project. Jasmine lowered her eyes for a moment as memories from the previous evening replayed in her mind. She remembered calling Caleb a failure, criticizing his work truck, and believing that years of perseverance had produced nothing meaningful. Now she realized he had been carrying the weight of confidential negotiations while protecting an opportunity that could not legally be discussed. When Caleb finished speaking, the audience rose together in a standing ovation that lasted nearly a full minute. He thanked everyone with a modest nod before stepping away from the podium, never celebrating himself, never mentioning the personal sacrifices behind the achievement. As the applause slowly faded, Daniel leaned toward the microphone once more and smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "our new project leader has requested something rather unusual before speaking with the national media. He would like to spend the rest of the afternoon meeting every engineer, inspector, and field employee who helped make this project possible." Instead of walking toward the line of television cameras waiting outside the auditorium, Caleb Morrison turned in the opposite direction and entered a large conference room where engineers, site supervisors, estimators, safety coordinators, inspectors, and project administrators had gathered after the ceremony. Many of them looked surprised that the man who had just become the public face of one of the largest federal infrastructure projects in the region wanted to spend his first hour with them instead of giving interviews. Caleb placed the leather portfolio on the conference table and smiled warmly. "Thank you all for staying," he began. "Before anyone writes headlines about this project, I wanted to personally thank the people who made it possible." The room became completely silent. Every drawing reviewed after midnight, every cost estimate checked one more time, every safety document revised, and every engineering calculation verified helped us earn this opportunity. My name may appear on the contract, but this achievement belongs to every person in this room. Several employees exchanged appreciative smiles while Michael Reeves quietly folded his arms. already recognizing the speech Caleb had refused to rehearse because he wanted every word to be sincere. Caleb continued walking slowly around the room instead of remaining behind the podium. He stopped beside a young structural engineer and asked how long she had been with the company. "Almost 2 years," she answered. Caleb smiled. "Then thank you for believing in us before today." He shook hands with an experienced site superintendent who had remained with the company through several difficult years when projects were scarce. "I never forgot the weekends you spent solving problems when everyone else had gone home," Caleb said. The superintendent smiled with visible emotion. "I only did my job." Caleb gently shook his head. "You did much more than that." As he moved from table to table, every conversation reinforced the same message. Success was never built by one person alone. Outside the conference room, reporters continued waiting for interviews while government staff politely explained that the project leader would join them later. Daniel Brooks watched the scene through the glass wall and smiled toward Olivia Grant. "I think we made the right decision," he said quietly. Olivia nodded. Technical excellence earned the contract. Character confirmed it. Meanwhile, Jasmine Morrison remained near the back of the hallway after most invited guests had already left. She could hear Caleb thanking employees one by one, remembering names, recognizing years of dedication, and giving credit to everyone except himself. She realized she had spent years believing ambition always looked loud, expensive, and impressive. Caleb's version of ambition looked remarkably different. It listened more than it spoke. It remembered people. It carried responsibility instead of pride. Nearly an hour later, the meeting concluded. Employees gathered around Caleb, not to congratulate him again, but to discuss project schedules, hiring plans, apprenticeship opportunities, and ways to strengthen local communities through the work ahead. Michael finally laughed and said, "I believe you have already turned your celebration into another planning meeting." Caleb smiled. Celebrations end. Responsibilities begin tomorrow morning. Everyone laughed softly because they knew he meant every word. As the room gradually emptied, Daniel approached carrying a folder containing the official project timeline. "The national media is still waiting," he said with an amused smile. Caleb accepted the folder and thanked him. Before they walked toward the press conference together, Caleb glanced through the hallway windows and noticed a familiar figure quietly standing near the entrance. Jasmine had not left. She was waiting patiently, and for the first time since she walked away from their marriage, there was no frustration in her expression, only quiet regret and the hope that he might give her a chance to speak. Caleb Morrison stepped into the media room with the same steady confidence he had carried throughout the day. Bright camera lights filled the stage while reporters from local and national news organizations adjusted microphones and prepared their questions. Daniel Brooks introduced him briefly before inviting the first reporter to begin. "Mr. Morrison," she asked, "many people expected one of the largest corporations in America to receive this contract. What allowed your company to outperform organizations many times your size?" Caleb smiled politely before answering. "Size can create opportunities, but preparation creates results. My team spent years studying the communities this project will serve. We listened carefully before we designed anything. We focused on solving problems instead of simply submitting the biggest proposal." Several reporters nodded while continuing to type notes. Another journalist raised his hand. "What does winning this contract mean for your company?" Caleb paused for a moment before answering. "It means more responsibility than celebration. Thousands of families will depend on the quality of our work. Every bridge, every roadway, every inspection, and every decision must justify the confidence the government and the public have placed in us." The room remained quiet as another reporter asked whether Caleb planned to expand aggressively after securing such a significant project. "Growth has never been my first goal," Caleb replied. "Building trust has always been more important. If growth follows trust, then it will last much longer." His calm answers quickly changed the tone of the press conference. Instead of chasing dramatic headlines, journalists began asking thoughtful questions about workforce development, apprenticeship programs, engineering innovation, and long-term infrastructure planning. Caleb answered every question with patience, always recognizing the contributions of his employees before mentioning himself. Nearly an hour later, the interviews concluded. As television crews packed away their equipment, several reporters approached Caleb personally to thank him for offering detailed answers instead of polished corporate slogans. One veteran journalist smiled and said, "You are not the executive we expected to meet today." Caleb laughed softly. That is probably true. Outside the conference center, the afternoon sun reflected across the glass buildings of downtown Charlotte as guests slowly departed. Caleb walked toward his familiar white work truck, carrying only the leather portfolio and the contract binder. Before reaching the driver's door, he noticed Jasmine Morrison standing quietly beside a row of flowering trees near the parking lot entrance. She had remained there through the entire press conference without interrupting him once. As Caleb approached, Jasmine took a slow breath. "Do you have a few minutes?" she asked gently. Caleb looked at his watch. Before nodding, "Yes." They stood facing one another in comfortable silence for several seconds. The excitement of the ceremony had faded, leaving only two people whose lives had changed in very different ways over the past 24 hours. Jasmine lowered her eyes. "I watched everything today," she said quietly. "Not only the announcement. I watched how your employees looked at you. I watched how government officials respected you. I watched how you treated every person you met." Caleb listened without interrupting. "I realized something," she continued. "I spent years measuring success by things people could immediately see. Expensive offices, luxury cars, public recognition. I never understood that real success often grows quietly before anyone notices it." Caleb remained calm, offering no words that would increase her embarrassment. Jasmine looked up again, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. "There is something I need to tell you, and I hope you will allow me to finish before you answer." Jasmine Morrison took a slow breath and looked directly into Caleb's eyes for the first time since the previous evening. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "Not because you won this contract, but because I stopped believing in you long before today." Caleb remained silent, allowing her to continue without interruption. "When business slowed down, I convinced myself that your future had already been decided. Every delayed project, every difficult month, every sacrifice made me believe you were falling behind while everyone else was moving ahead. Instead of standing beside you, I measured your worth by what I could immediately see." She paused as emotion filled her voice. "I never asked what you were carrying. I never wondered why you stayed awake reviewing blueprints or why you left before sunrise every morning. I assumed I already knew the answers." Caleb folded his hands calmly in front of him. "The confidentiality agreement prevented me from discussing the negotiations," he said gently. "Even if I wanted to explain everything, I legally could not." Jasmine nodded. "I understand that now, but I also understand something much more painful. I should not have needed an explanation to remain loyal." The afternoon breeze moved gently through the trees surrounding the conference center as traffic flowed steadily along the nearby streets. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, Jasmine looked toward Caleb's familiar white work truck parked only a few yards away. "Yesterday I saw that truck as proof that you had failed," she admitted. "Today I watched you arrive in the exact same truck while every executive around you stepped out of luxury vehicles. Not once did you seem embarrassed." Caleb smiled softly. "That truck carried me to every project site where our company earned its reputation. I never needed it to impress anyone. I only needed it to get me where I was supposed to be." Jasmine lowered her head again. "I kept waiting for you to embarrass me today by acting arrogant after everyone discovered what you had accomplished. Instead, you thanked your employees, praised your engineers, respected every reporter, and never mentioned yourself unless someone asked. Watching that made me realize I misunderstood success completely." Caleb looked across the parking lot where several members of his team were laughing together after months of relentless work. "Success is temporary if it only belongs to one person," he replied. "Character is what remains after the applause ends." Tears gathered in Jasmine's eyes, though she quickly brushed them away. "I left because I believed there was no future with you," she whispered. "Now I realize the future was never the problem. My faith was." Caleb remained thoughtful before answering. "The contract changed my business. It did not change who I am." Jasmine nodded slowly. "I know. That is exactly why I am ashamed of my decision." She hesitated before asking the question that had been weighing on her heart all afternoon. "Is there any chance we can begin again?" Caleb did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the skyline where the setting sun reflected across the buildings, reminding him how quickly circumstances could change while character remained constant. "Trust is built the same way we build bridges," he finally said. "One carefully placed piece at a time. It cannot be rushed, and it cannot survive without a strong foundation. Jasmine accepted his words without arguing because she understood he was not punishing her. He was simply protecting something valuable. As they stood together in the quiet parking lot, Caleb's phone vibrated once inside his jacket. He glanced at the screen and saw a message from Michael Reeves. The first leadership meeting for the new federal project had been moved to early the next morning, and the agenda included an announcement that would shape not only the company's future, but the lives of every employee who had remained loyal through its hardest years. Early the next morning, every employee of Morrison Infrastructure Group gathered inside the company's largest meeting room, expecting another technical briefing before work officially began. Instead, they found Caleb Morrison standing beside Michael Reeves with a simple presentation displayed behind them. There were no oversized celebration banners, no expensive decorations, and no speeches prepared for television cameras. Caleb looked around the room at the engineers, estimators, inspectors, accountants, project coordinators, equipment managers, and field supervisors who had stayed with the company through years when success was far from certain. Before we discuss schedules or budgets, he began, I want to thank every person who chose to believe in this company when believing was not easy. The room became completely silent. Yesterday, the country learned that we received a $500 million federal contract. What they did not see were the years that came before it. They did not see weekends spent solving impossible problems, nights reviewing plans after your families had gone to sleep, or mornings when many of you showed up even though you were uncertain where the next project would come from. You built this company long before anyone recognized its name. Several employees quietly smiled while others lowered their eyes with emotion. Caleb continued, Today I want that loyalty to be rewarded. Michael distributed sealed envelopes across the room. Inside each one was a letter explaining a new employee profit-sharing program funded by the company's future growth. Longtime employees would also receive additional retirement contributions, expanded family health benefits, paid apprenticeship opportunities for young tradespeople, and education assistance for employees who wanted to continue developing their professional skills. The room remained silent for only a second before grateful applause filled the building. One veteran superintendent stood and said, You remembered every promise you ever made. Caleb smiled warmly. A promise is only valuable if it survives success. After the meeting ended, employees returned to work carrying more confidence than they had ever felt before. Outside the office, Caleb noticed Jasmine Morrison waiting beside the same white work truck that had carried him through every difficult season. She greeted him with a quiet smile, not expecting forgiveness, only hoping to earn another opportunity to prove she had learned from her mistake. Caleb walked toward her without anger. How are you today? He asked. Jasmine answered honestly, still embarrassed. Still grateful that you listened yesterday. Caleb nodded thoughtfully. People make mistakes. What matters is what they choose to build afterward. Jasmine looked toward the busy office where employees were laughing together as they prepared for the company's biggest project in history. I spent too much time believing success was measured by what people owned, she admitted. Now I understand it is measured by the lives people improve. Caleb smiled because those words reflected a lesson no contract could ever purchase. They walked together toward the office entrance at an unhurried pace, not because every problem had already disappeared, but because both understood that rebuilding trust required patience, honesty, and consistent actions. Some foundations are poured in concrete, while others are built through forgiveness earned one decision at a time. As Caleb opened the front door, he looked once more at the white work truck parked beneath the morning sun. It had never represented failure. It had carried determination through every season when success remained invisible. And in the end, the greatest victory was never the contract itself. It was proving that quiet integrity, unwavering perseverance, and genuine respect for others will always outlast wealth, appearances, and the opinions of people who judge a story before they know how it truly ends.